The videos are footage from the news. I hope that you guys watch or read the news already, so you guys have more information, or at least have the same, grand, or what is it called, standing point, so that you know that why we're here today, so that you at least you know a little bit about this Asian crime in America. So yeah, I think let's just go check the videos first, and then after that, we can continue talking to our beloved speakers today. So Edus, please roll the video.
Vicharatana. A professional jazz pianist beaten so badly he can no longer play piano. And now 7 Asian people shot dead in Georgia 2 days ago. Vicharatana, murdered. Pak Ho, murdered. Noel Quintana, face slashed with a blade from ear to ear. An 89-year-old woman set on fire. Tadataka Ono, a professional jazz pianist beaten so badly he can no longer play piano. And now 7 Asian people shot dead in Georgia 2 days ago, 6 of whom were women. These are only a few of the 3,800 reported incidents since last March. I was speaking to a pollster during the recent elections, and I asked him why, when I see polling results broken down by race, do I so rarely see Asian Americans as a separate category? He heard my question, he looked me dead in the eye, and he said, because Asian Americans are considered statistically insignificant. Statistically insignificant. Now, all of you listening to me here by virtue of your own elections are more familiar with the intricacies of polling than I am, so undoubtedly, you already know what this means. Statistically insignificant literally means we don't matter. We as Asian Americans have come to this country because we believe in the American dream. Many of us have succeeded, and some of us are even the frontline healthcare workers upon whom we've all come to depend during this terrible pandemic. But many of us are struggling too. In fact, the wealth disparity between the richest Asian Americans and the poorest is the largest of any ethnic group in America. In New York, Asian Americans have a higher poverty rate than any other minority group, where fully 1 in 4 are living below the poverty line. And poverty rates among Asian American seniors are much higher than the national average. That's something to consider as we watch the most vulnerable in our community get taunted, pushed, slashed, and murdered. Despite this wide disparity of experiences, we continue to be tagged the model minority. We simply cannot continue to live with the myth that the most successful of us represent the totality of us. So we know the hurdles we face. The question for us here is, what can we do about them? One of the places that starts is with education. Let's teach them everything that Professor Lee so eloquently highlighted for us, including celebrating the fact that the most decorated combat unit in U.S. military history was the 442nd Combat Team, a unit in World War II made up entirely of Asian Americans. Now, these are not moments in Asian American history. This is American history. When we are erased from our history books, we are made invisible. And the result, to quote Congresswoman Meng, is that we are perpetually made to feel like foreigners in our own country. Include our stories because they matter. We must also empower our local community organizers by directing funds to areas that have been historically impoverished, not just for the benefit of the AAPI community, but for the benefit of all communities living there, most of whom are non-white. It's no wonder that there's historically been tension among racial groups when the thing they have most in common is poverty and lack of access to services. And there happen to be 2 pieces of legislation before this committee as we speak that deal with these specific issues. One is the No Hate Bill. It provides necessary grants of money to community organizations, counseling for those convicted of hate crimes, and improved data collection for hate crime reporting, among other important services. The committee also has before it right now the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act introduced by Congresswoman Mang and Senator Hirono. It's crucial that we have reliable reporting for these hate crimes and an infrastructure that makes it easy for people for whom English is not their primary language. Chairman Nadler, you have been an ally to the AAPI community in the past. I respectfully urge you not to let these bills languish in committee, but see them through so that they can be passed by the full House and then on to the Senate. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that I'm going to convince all of you to stand up for us. Trust me, I've seen your voting records. But I am speaking to those to whom humanity still matters. In closing, let me just say that there are several moments in a country's history that chart its course indelibly for the future. For Asian Americans, that moment is now. What happens right now and over the course of the coming months will send a message for generations to come as to whether we matter. Whether the country we call home chooses to erase us or include us, dismiss us or respect us, invisibilize us or see us. Because you may consider us statistically insignificant now, but one more fact that has no alternative is that we are the fastest growing racial demographic in the country. We are 23 million strong. We are united, and we are waking up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Wait. I hope I hope everyone mute your microphone. So Edis, please help. Okay. Yeah, guys, that was the video from Mr. Kim. It was very powerful speech. I'm sure those who are aware of this issue have watched the video, because I think the video went viral and it made quite news on some big, like news, like newspaper and even magazines, online magazines, and then even on YouTube as well. So I hope you guys watched it already, and then even if you guys just watched it now, I hope that you got the message, because in that speech you can get the idea of what's been going on with the Asian American there in the States, what happened to them. So today we have two our dear friends, uh, gentlemen from the States, who happen to be fellow Asian with us, but they are American as well, and we want to hear from them. We want to learn from them about the real situation, how it feels to be Asian American, especially in this difficult situation, whether they're impacted or not, and just to hear their stories about the experiences that they have dealt with, or they have witnessed themselves. We are going to find out more from them, and then of course, like the essence of this native speaker day, they will help us also to make you have the experience of speaking English. And so yeah, without further ado, I would like to welcome my friends Franklin Shan and Adrian Nguyen. Virtual applause for them. Yeah. So yeah, hi guys. How are you? Adrian and Franklin, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. No, thank you for having us here.
Yep. Adrian in Atlanta, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. And Franklin is in New York. And then
Yep, I'm in
he's
New York
joining
City.
in New York City. And then he's joining us now with his dog behind him named Kenzie, right? Since the beginning, since he joined, I've I've already liked the dog. So yeah, um, yeah, well, first of all, I would like to thank you again for joining, for taking your time. I know this is very late there, but we're here to hear from you guys. So feel free to share anything that you think important for us to know, because uh, students and guys who are joining us now, just for your information, that these two gentlemen are very outspoken. If you happen to follow them on Instagram or on Clubhouse, because that's where I met them, they've been very outspoken about fighting for or standing up for Asian American rights. So I think they deserve this platform to talk to us, because Adrian kept saying that they're just normal person, but hey, you guys are way better than us, because at least you guys speak up for something that right, and we want to learn from you guys today. So yeah, feel free. I think Adrian, you may go first to share with us anything.
Yeah, so about me, I am, so my real name is Ein, but I can also go by Adrian because it's easier to pronounce. I am an immigrant to the United States. I was born in Vietnam. I was born near the city of Ho Chi Minh City, or Saigon. And I moved to the United States at the age of 8 to Atlanta. So the incident that Daniel Day Kim, the person that was in the video, reference, the shooting, the place of the shooting actually happened 10 minutes from where I lived. On that day, I remember specifically driving past it on the way to the gym, and I had realized, like, oh my gosh, this is what exactly had happened. And so, I think like 2 days later, I drove past by and I paid my respects to lay down the flowers. And I think the most resident memory that I had there was that on the sign on the gold spa, where the location was that it was open 24 hours, right? Like, I drive past this probably more than half a month, like half a year. I drive past this place and I never paid attention to it. I never paid attention to the people who worked in there. And for some times when I was laying down the flowers, I was like, I wish this place was open. I wish this place was open right now, instead of me having to go and lay down flowers to pay respect to the people whose lives have been lost. I wish it didn't have to happen at all, but it happened, right? Like, this kind of stuff has been happening for a year now, these nonstop. And discrimination against Asians and Asian Americans in the United States has been ongoing for past 150 years. So I think for me, as an Asian American person, as an Asian immigrant, right now, I think, you ask what you can do for yourself. I think for me, I myself am teaching and self-educating. I'm learning about the people who paved the way for me to be able to be here, for me to really actually understand the successes and the privilege that I have of being Asian American, is to learn about the history, about the people who helped build this country and who's helped build our future as well. That's just a little bit of something to share. I don't want to take up space, so I'll let Franklin kind of do his introduction as well.
No, thank you, Adrian. And I mean, I feel like you've done more than that. And that's actually how Adrian and I got to know each other. We've never actually met in person. We met via the virtual space. And the reason why we met was Adrian reached out to me to ask a couple of questions about how did I sort of push my company and my organization to think a little bit more about these Asian American incidents that have been happening and impacting our community. And so, Adrian has done some amazing work, I would say, with his organization, Home Depot. And still, there's a lot of work to be done there. But, I was really happy to hear that he spoke with his team and a number of different individuals there and really tried to create a little bit more awareness within his company, which is a very large national company in the US, much bigger than the company that I work for. But in terms of, to build upon what Adrian sort of mentioned, I definitely think I was really hit hard, I think, by a lot of the incidents that have been happening to our community. And really, it started at the beginning. Well, it's been, as Adrian mentioned, it's been happening for years now. And I know during my childhood, I experienced it during college. But I think with COVID, it was sort of a new version of this type of incidents impacting our community, right? And I think it was sort of bad timing in the sense that one, we had this president that sort of inflamed a lot and stoked the fires to sort of instigate, I think, this unconscious or conscious hate towards our community. But at the same time, the incidents of George Floyd were happening. And so I think that, for better or worse, overshadowed a lot of the things that were impacting our Asian American community. I think in February, when I first started noticing everything that was happening, it was really interesting. I started to see a pattern of Asian American violence. There are two that were mentioned by Daniel Day Kim, but there's also other incidents that were happening that week of February. I think it was the third week of February. And I created a social media post the same time that Amanda Nok-Win made a video about it. And both of our social media items went viral. Her video was shared all over the place. My social media post was shared in a number of different places, and it just sort of snowballed from there. We saw a lot of awareness with Asian American community. Really, I think one being, it was hard to deny what was happening, right? And I think for a lot of people, especially in my company, there was a sense of like, is this really racism? Is this really bad? Is it just crime, or is it something that's really focused on Asian Americans? And I think as every single event happened, week after week, day after day, leading up to Atlanta, I think people were becoming increasingly aware that there is something deeper here. And I'm sort of thankful that there was much more awareness about the issue with America, but I've also been thankful that a lot of Asian Americans have also found their voice, have also begun their journey towards discovering their identity and their heritage and their history within the United States and what that really means. And there's still much more to do. But I've been really thankful to be part of that journey with a lot of people, been able to connect with a lot of people virtually, same as here, connecting with all of you, but also been able to do a lot of work, I think, with the community. Actually, this weekend, I will be distributing pepper spray to a number of people for free that we raised, as well as booklets on how to report hate crimes this weekend in Flushing, New York, as well as in Chinatown, New York. And so still trying to be involved, still trying to make a difference, but there's a lot of work to be done. But I definitely appreciate, I'm very honored to be here today to speak to everyone.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the company. I'm sorry, I kind of missed that part when Franklin mentioned about Adrian's company and also your organization. Would you mind telling us what you said about it?
Sure. So I just switched jobs maybe 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. But when at the beginning of these events in February, I was working for a company called Flatiron Health. We are a health technology company that tries to fight cancer with big data. And we're about 1,000-person company. And so I would say we're high growth, relatively small in the US, but within our organization, we have something called ERGs, or employee resource groups. In some organizations, those are called affinity groups, and in other places, they're called business resource groups. And those are basically clubs or organizations within a company that focus on a particular community or population, right? And so at my company, we had an Asian ERG. And so a lot of the members were Asians, but we also had a Black ERG, a Latinx ERG, one for parents, an ERG for women, and also an ERG for disabilities, right? And so these are basically organization clubs within the company where you can find people who are potentially going through the same experiences as you are, build some extra connection within the workplace that might not be your immediate coworkers, as well as try to create a safe space to share things that might be going on and impacting our world. And so I was talking about this in Clubhouse, which is an app that we use to sort of just talk and connect with other individuals, sort of just through group chat. And Adrian, I think, was part of that same room, and he was wondering what his company, which is I'll let Adrian talk about them, but he wanted to connect with me to see what he could do at his organization. I don't know, Adrian, if you want to talk more about that specific reach out as well as what you did there.
So I'll give kind of my background. So I had viewed these things the same time when Franklin and Shaw There was a man named Vichai Ratnapakdi. He was an 84-year-old man. He was on his driveway, and there was a video of him being pushed, like violently pushed. And I think that was what shocked me. And then there was another event. It was Steven Yeun. So Steven Yeun is a very popular Korean American actor. I think his movie Minari got nominated for an Academy Award. I think I highly encourage everyone in this audience to check it out because it's a very good story about the Asian American experience. But he had said a quote, and it says, and I paraphrase, which is saying, sometimes to me, being Asian American is when you're thinking about everyone else, but wondering if anyone is thinking about you at all. And I think that really hit home because I think, I think that kind of part was because I was in an ARG, which is an associate resource group, which is another term that Franklin has used. And I had felt that we hadn't said anything, right? I work for I think the top 25 or top 50 company in the United States, one of the largest home retail improvement stores in the United States. This is $100 billion company. And we ourselves, I walk amongst the floor of the office, and I think maybe 2 in 10 or 3 in 10 of the people that work there are either Asian American or, look Asian. And so I was getting very upset because it was like, we haven't said a single thing. And why haven't we said a single thing? And on March 16th at 4 p.m., I had called a meeting to call all of the boards, all of the members, and saying, stop Asian hate. What can we do about it? And then 2 hours later, the shootings in Atlanta happened. So it was only really momentous. I don't even know if it was a coincidence or it was like a chance, but the fact that that had to happen 2 hours after noticing it means that it was building up to something the entire time for that year. And I think that's kind of like Daniel Days Kim's last point is that Asian Americans are waking up, right? Like this generation that moved here when either they were young or when they were first or second generation is now beginning to learn and beginning to understand where we think where our perspective on where we think we should lie on society is. And I think for a long time is that we haven't really talked about this. We haven't been engaged in it until George Floyd protests. So to give so there's about 82 people here, and most of them are from Indonesia. So just to give a recap, what happened in George Floyd in last 2020 was the most momentous thing to happen in the United States. It consumed, I think, the entire year. Because there were I think month after month in the United States, there was something that was happening, but everyone remembered June 2020. And so what happened is that in George Floyd, it was in Minnesota, there was a Black man. He was getting arrested by the police. During that kind of incident, one of the police officer, his name is Derek Chauvin, placed his knee on the Black man's neck. And he held it there for 9 minutes. And a young woman happened to capture it and upload it to social media. I think that weekend, everyone saw that video. And right, and before that, there was a person named Ahmaud Arbery. He was living in southern Georgia, the state where I'm from, and he was running. And we saw two white people on a truck gun him down and shot him. So that was completely a week before, right? That was about either March or something like that. So the whole country fed up after COVID for 3 months, seeing people being died. And I think on that weekend, on that day or something, 2 days after George Floyd died, they burned down the Minneapolis police station, right? And there were protests every single day in the country. And I think for a lot of Asian Americans at that time, we realized holy crap, my friends are Black. I understand what they're going right now. I grew up in Atlanta. Franklin grew up in New York, or I think he might have, or he went to college there. He works there. He lives there. Either way, we have Black friends. We understand what they go through. And I think a year later, we shift this onto ourselves. And I think that's kind of the part where Asian Americans are waking up. You have this highly educated, highly motivated and really like energized group of people who are now trying to understand and reconcile with that. Franklin, what do you think?
I think before Franklin can add up to what Adrian said, maybe I can translate a little bit for our friends here who like who might be lost in like English translation. So ya teman-teman, jadi yang Franklin dan Adrian sampaikan kepada kita bahwa yang pertama tadi ya tentang apa background mereka ya, mereka bagaimana mereka di tempat mereka masing-masing selama ini dengan organisasi mereka juga terkait dan kemudian bagaimana mereka bergerak atau mulai berinisiatif gitu untuk ikutan dalam anti kekerasan atau anti rasisme terhadap orang Asia Amerika ini. Kalau tadi mungkin belum sempat saya sampaikan, kalau Franklin ini dia adalah orang Amerika tapi keturunan Asia itu Cina ya, Hong Kong ya. Terus kalau dari Adrian ini dia juga keturunan Vietnam seperti itu. Nah, selama ini mereka Adrian itu tinggalnya di Atlanta, di tempat kejadian yang mana tadi itu 8 orang itu dibunuh, dan Franklin sendiri ada di New York seperti itu. Nah, yang tadi mereka jelaskan tentang bagaimana mereka mulai inilah istilahnya bahwa Asia Amerika itu tidak bisa lagi tinggal diam, dan itu momentumnya itu terjadi pada kejadian George Floyd di tahun 2020 kemarin. Jadi seperti itu yang terjadi yang kemudian membuat orang Asia Amerika ini tidak bisa lagi tinggal diam. I think Franklin, you want to add something about what Adrian said before?
No, I think Adrian put it extremely well in terms of what happened, and I think to build upon what Adrian was saying is that I definitely do think a lot of Asian Americans found themselves really opening up and learning more about racism, right? I think George Floyd, even though it was something that impacted a Black man, I think for a huge part of it, there was a call for solidarity, right? I think a lot of people who are marginalized, whether they're Black or Asian, we're asking for people to stand together, to protest, to educate, and to push for change. And so for a lot of Asian Americans who were just learning about the Black Lives Matter or racism in the US, they were being introduced into what racism in the US really looked like, as well as what the history of Asian and Black solidarity or partnership looks like in the US. And so I think that was really what initiated a lot of people to go down that path. And then, but there are still some people who didn't understand that, right? And there still are people who still don't understand that. And I think when this event started happening in February, some people were already sort of in the trenches thinking about racism. And then others, again, were introduced to the idea that, hey, this is something that is real. Racism does exist in America. And it's not something that only impacts Black people, but also impacts Asian Americans. It also impacts other races and ethnicities in the US. And so I think there's still a lot of learning to be done there. But George Floyd, I think, really, and the pandemic, really sort of accelerated and opened up the views for a lot of people, for sure.
Yeah. I think since you guys mentioned about the racism that that has been happening for very, very long time, I wonder what kind of racism. I think Franklin, you even mentioned about you experienced it yourself when you were a kid. What type of racism? We need to just to know what type or in what form is it the racism that's happening even to this smallest kid.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think this is just my personal experience. And what's really unique about the Asian American community is it is extremely diverse. Your experience in America really depends on the community, the city that you grew up in, your family. And so for me, I was actually born in the US. My parents immigrated in the 70s during the Vietnam War. They were escaping communism from China and then communism from Vietnam. And so they were refugees. They're called the Bo people, children of the Bo people. When they immigrated to the US here, and they were actually sponsored by a church. And so my parents are Buddhist. They were Buddhist in America, but during the Vietnam War, a lot of churches were sponsoring immigrants and refugees because of their heart and what they've learned in the Bible, right? And so they were sponsoring a number of different families. And that's how my family, my parents ended up in this really small town called Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It is central in the state of Pennsylvania, which is right underneath New York. It is most famous for its Amish people, which I don't know how many people know what Amish people are, but they are a specific community in the US that immigrated from Germany. So they're white, but they don't use electricity. They use horse and buggies to get around. And so you can imagine the town that I grew up in was pretty rural. And the town that I grew up in was extremely white. And so my first experience with racism was, I think, in seventh grade. I think when you grow up in a small town, you grow up with your friends. And so I think most of my friends and I, we didn't really think about each other from a race perspective. We knew each other since kids. And I think also as a child, you might not have learned all of that yet, right? And so, you know, in seventh grade, a new family moved to my city, a new family moved to my town. And this, while I was waiting for the bus to go home, she was making fun of me and then called me a racial slur, which for me was chink, CHINK. And that is a really derogatory term that's thrown towards Asian Americans, usually Chinese or people think that are Chinese. And I had no idea what it meant. A teacher had to tell me what it meant. And I could tell it was really difficult for her to share that with me, but that's the first time I felt like someone really noticed me for my skin, noticed me for being different. And that really sort of was my first exposure to that. And then fast forward to high school, I was part of the marching band and we were doing a parade. And before we did the parade, our teacher told us to be careful because the place we're doing this parade is in the same city where the headquarters for the region for the KKK was. And so for Pennsylvania, there's an office near where I lived that was known to be racist. So KKK, or the Ku Klux Klan, is an organization in the US that's very famous to not like people of color. They have a history of killing a lot of Blacks in America and targeting them, and some of them still exist today. So again, I realized that racism was here in this country. But I think most of the racism that I really experienced was in college or after college, when I started traveling to different cities in the US, where, you know, I would get spit on, I would get pushed. I would be told, like, you know, to go back home, go back to your country, even though I was born in the US. And I've gotten into fights with some people about it because I do think, you know, I've seen my friends impacted by that, and I don't like my friends treated that way. And so, like, a lot of my female friends would be approached by people and sort of fetishized or objectified as Asian women. There's something called Asian fetish here, and like I would have to step in and sort of get in the way of that, and that could cause a lot of anger for a lot of individuals. So I've experienced for a number of years. Nothing as bad as like some of the incidents that have happened recently where people were pushed to the ground or died, or acid or lit on fire. But definitely there have been some violent altercations that I've experienced. And for people who don't know, I'm 40 years old, and so it's just a lot of years of experience for me.
Asian don't age then. It's true.
Yeah, we say Asian don't raisin. We don't rain down.
Yeah, you hear. Well, wow. I mean, like, still, even though you mentioned that it's not as bad as all the incidents that happened mentioned by Mr. Kim, still, I mean, even to hear the slurs, racial slurs, I don't think it's good. Let alone it happened to very young kid. Well, I mean, nice. a good experience. I mean, very inspirational for people to stand strong, and especially because you stood up for that. You stood up for your female friends. Very good to hear about it. And I'm sure Adrian himself must have, gone through something like that. Maybe, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned about something happened to your parents as well, right, Adrian? In last time
Yeah,
we had
yeah,
conversation.
yeah. So I moved to the United States, um, to the United States when I was 8. So at that concept, at 8 years old, you know what your identity was. You know where you're from. You know the food you eat. You know the street that you grew up from. So when I moved to the United States, Franklin, for him, he was always American. He is American. To him, his concept of being American is who he is. It's where his country is from, right? My identity as an American had to be formed. So I think in the beginning there, Franklin had mentioned that the term Asian American is very diverse. It could mean people from Indonesia, it could mean people from Japan, it could even mean people from China, it could even mean people from the Middle East or India. So the term Asian American was actually coined in the 1968 by this guy named Duji Ichioka. And that is where Asian American come from. So that's where that identity comes from. And that identity has to be formed. It has to be formed from our experiences that we brought over from our country and our homelands and the food that's defined who we are as Asian American. To grow up in this country thinking that you're American and then having something from your own culture that you bring over. And so I think for me, as a person that grew up in Vietnam, that was raised in Vietnam for 8 years, I came here knowing that I was Vietnamese. And so my experience of racism has been, when I stepped foot on this country, I realized that I was different. I knew that I was different. I was born in Vietnam. There was obviously a war. And I remember being in 8th grade explaining to a kid where I was from. And the first thing he said to me was, my grandfather killed your grandfather. Right? Like that's something that an 8-year-old knows, right? An 8-year-old knows about the Vietnam War. An 8-year-old knows that Americans killed Vietnamese people. And he had the audacity, he knew that he could say that to me to hurt me. And so to me, like that experience kind of had always been growing up. I had people shoot pellets at my house and made fun of me. I was bullied. Like all these kind of events happened. But I think for me, just like Franklin, I realized it more as an adult, because as an adult, you start becoming more aware, you start becoming more educated. And it really wasn't until 2020 that I started feeling very uncomfortable, just walking around in public with a mask on, with my eyes and my skin and my hair, knowing that all these things are happening. And I mentioned, I think I shared this with you, Herto, but in December 2020, my parents' house was broken into. Second time in 3 years, right? Like second time in 3 years, I had asked the police officer, why was our house being broken into? And the police officer said, it is because you are Asian. It is because they think that you have businesses. It is because they think that you have cash and jewelry and that you store them in your house and you don't go to a bank. And it is they think that you don't have that. And you know what? He told me there's gangs across the United States right now that are targeting houses who are Asian American. And I was like, how do they know that we Asian people live here? And it's like, well, yeah, we live here. Like when we made this our home, like people drive by, they see Asian people, like people here, like, right? Like that's what it's like. Sometimes, like that's my experience. So I was always very aware of this, but I never spoke out about it, right? I think for the longest time, we've been told like your experiences isn't hard enough like other people's, or your experiences aren't something that, you don't have to think about. Our parents tell us this, ignore it. You know what? Like make fun of you for being Asian, study harder, become better than them, work harder than them. And a lot of people get this from their parents. And so they put their head down, they don't say anything about it. And then they get to this level in their career and they make a lot of money. They have a really nice job, but still they don't earn the respect that they think that they should have in society.
So
I think that's.
is it why Asian American called model minority? Because we just,
Yeah.
we stay silent about all the oppression and in systemic racism that happened in the States.
Well, I'll let Franklin answer that. I'll chime in after. I think I want to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why a lot of I think Asian Americans keep quiet is dual purpose. One is this idea of the model minority myth and how it sort of originated was really the idea and the concept that that is what we should aspire to be, right? And so when people think about, if I want to be an American, I need to be obedient, I need to be quiet, I need to be a model. And so that's sort of where the model minority myth is partially attributed to, but it was also like a wedge to say, hey, if you're in a minority in America, you can succeed. Look at Asian Americans. And it's a false myth, because at that time, a lot of Asian Americans succeeded because we had specific immigration laws that had forced only educated individuals to immigrate from Asia to the US, right? So they inherently were educated and more successful. But another reason why a lot of Asian Americans today don't speak up are two reasons. One is culturally, like I think whether something bad happened or not, a lot of Asian cultures tend to keep their heads down and keep things within the family, right? Like, hey, it's something that we can solve on our own. No one else needs to know. We have our handle on these type of things. So it's very much cultural. The second piece goes to the diversity of Asian Americans and where they're coming from. For example, a lot of Asian Americans are immigrants, some of them legal, some of them illegal. Some of them are trying to get a visa renewal. And so there is fear that if they report anything to the authorities, it could hurt their status, right? They're afraid that they might be deported. They're afraid that there might be a mark on their visa and they won't be able to get a renewal and they won't be able to get a job. And so there's also this fear of authority that makes people not potentially speak up.
Wow, good point on that. But I think thanks to all the things that's been happening this past 2 years. I mean, like you mentioned about these two possible reasons why people are very, like, Asian American are very silent about what's been going on to them. But I think since what have been happening these past 2 years, people now dare to speak up, because like I think Adrian mentioned about earn the respect that they deserve. Because sometimes even though Asian Americans are successful, still I don't think with the system, systemic racism that happening there, I don't think Asian American really earn the respect that they should have as American there. So I think that's good. Well, guys, I think it is time for you to join in question and answer session. I'm sure that the sharing from Franklin and Adrian can develop more by the questions that you have. Me as moderator, I might have missed some points in asking the questions to these two gentlemen, but I'm sure as audience, and I know that you guys must be paying attention to whatever they shared with us. I know you guys must have questions, so yeah, feel free to ask any questions, and even if you want to comment on the issue that they talk about. I know that like I said, we have Mr. Moyer from Seattle here, from Seattle, US, and also I was told that we also have Mr. Sanjaya, the CEO for Youth Organization Association of Southeast Asian Nations, joining us also today. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Sanjaya, and also the leader from other study program. We got Ibu Erita as well as the head of nurse study program. I know there are Asian Americans who working as nurse also, immigrate to US. So yeah, it's good to have you here today with us. Yeah, and you guys just please raise your hand if you want to ask questions. Okay. Meanwhile, I will go to. Uh, is there any questions or?
Yes, we got question from Yesi.
Okay, yes, see. Yeah, okay, yes, see. Please open your camera. This time you cannot hide your face again. I know last time you joined our program, you did not show your face. Okay, beautiful.
I hope that
Okay,
my connection is all right. So thank you for the opportunities that's given to me. So I want to ask question from either of you. Adrian mentioned before about George
sorry, sorry,
Floyd.
sorry. Sorry, I have to cut you first. Okay, could you please introduce yourself before asking the questions so he know?
So my name is Yesiriana. I'm from International Relation. So I want to ask question before Adrian mentioned about George Floyd and the role of a bystander, which I believe that it is crucial, which personally, I don't think that we will have such a result in a trial without the role of the bystander. So I would like to ask question, how it is the role of a bystander in America in general, especially maybe in New York, since I think that like it's a melting pot in states. How it is the general reaction of a bystander towards the racism that or attacks that has been received by an Asian American in states. Thank you.
Thank you, Yesi. Franklin, you want to go first?
Sure. I think that's a really great question. And I don't think there is a single answer to that. A really good, not good, but a video that really highlights this happened, I think, 2 weeks ago in actually New York, 10 blocks from where I live, where a 65-year-old Filipino grandmother got attacked on the streets outside a residential building. And this was a video from inside the lobby of the resident building. And what happened was the doorman and this other delivery guy just ignored what was happening outside and they shut the door on her, right? And so that was very indicative of how a lot of people in America think about incidents like this, especially violent incidents, where they might not care that someone is being attacked or they don't know quite what to do, right? And so actually a lot of people, regardless of whether it's Asian or not Asian, they actually don't know what to do when there's a violent incident that's happening in front of them, right? And that's also why it's super important if you have the opportunity to go through something that we call a bystander intervention training. Because I think when things like this happen, a lot of people don't know what to do. They either freeze, they run away, they're scared because they think it might happen to them. And so it's really, I think our natural instinct might not always be to intervene, or we do intervene, but not in the best way, right? And so when you go through this type of training, I think I think a lot of people in America are going through right now, there's basically 5 ways to sort of respond as a bystander. And it's sort of called the 5D framework. And so 1 is to distract, right? And so if you see something happening, could you potentially distract them from and make them pay attention to you? Not necessarily in a negative way, but maybe you just start singing, right? Or you pretend to have a fight with your friend as well, just so it diverts attention. Or you yell the police are here. But that's one way to sort of intervene, which is distract. The second piece is document. And what you've seen so far in media is the importance of documentation. This was true for George Floyd. This was true for Vika. This is true for the woman who was attacked in New York. A lot of hate crimes go unreported or nothing happens to them because there's no evidence, right? And hate crimes are extremely hard to prove in the US. So if there is this incident, a great role that people can play is to document. And what's been really amazing to see in the US is more people are documenting what's going on. Smartphones allow that to happen really easily. And so people can whip out their phone and start recording right away. And so at the very beginning of any incident, that's the first thing you can potentially do as a bystander is to document. The third D is to delegate, which is if you see something happening and maybe someone's not seeing it, tell them what to do. It's like, hey, call 911, you start recording, and then what I will do is I will make sure that this person is okay, and also try to get witnesses, right? So delegate, get other people involved, make sure that other people have eyes on it. The more, the better, right? That's more angles, more witnesses, more statements that can be made towards it. Then you also have, document, distract, delegate. The other is direct. Like you go and you actually confront the person who's making the attack as much as possible. And so, I think you should do that using your best judgment. But there's opportunities sometimes, depending on what you look like, how big you are, and what you feel like you can do, is just to go up and directly say, hey, can you please stop doing that? It makes me feel uncomfortable, or I don't appreciate you're making my kids cry. But definitely direct is another way to sort of do that. And I cannot remember the fifth D for some reason. So, but there's 5 of them out there. Oh, I think the other one is delay. You sort of wait, and you approach the victim afterwards to make sure that they're okay, because you're not ready to deal with the situation right away.
So these 5 Ds are the things that you can do as bystanders when like hate crimes or when the assault happening, right? And then you're there. So yeah, guys, I think this is very good, and you need to remember that there's 5D. I remember from the 5th one: direct, delegate, distract. That's the first. Distract, documentary, and then the 3rd one.
So it's So it's distract, document, delegate,
yes, delegate,
direct, and
yes,
delay.
Okay.
So yeah, and I think in delay is probably the one that's the most hardest to kind of make sense, right? How do you delay? And I think it's kind of like, hey, like just check in on that person afterwards, follow up with them. I think Franklin is right? The video of the woman being attacked outside of that building and the 2 men not knowing what to do, it is a shock. And it's a shock because a crime happened. You see something, I remember in front of my eyes, I think I remember I was driving and a motorcycle accident happened right in front of me. And I was like, I don't know what to do. What do I do? Do I do something? But I think for me, because I was like, I can't just sit here and like let that person be on the ground. I stepped out and I pulled the motorcycle off of the person. I helped kind of move. And I think that's something that's one part of being a bystander. You can be the person that helps. You can be the person that documents. You can be the person that distracts. Everyone plays a role into helping one another. But the action is kind of like, do something. Don't just sit there. And I think the second thing to talk about is that I learned this today. In that video, you have the 2 security guards who were seeing that woman being attacked. I didn't realize, I think when I first saw that, I was like, how could they stand there and not do something? And I didn't realize those 2 people were Black. And so being a relationship between being Black and being Asian in this country right now is the most complex thing that you can have to discuss. It's the most nuanced. And when I say nuance, I think what I'm trying to say is that it is so layered on so many years and kind of understanding history of the United States. I'm not trying to go into that. But the thing is that for them, seeing a person being attacked and them trying to do something involves calling the police. And calling the police in the United States in that relationship to being Black between a person is one of the hardest things to do, because there is a cultural history between the police killing Black people in the United States. And that's kind of something that, we have to talk about, how that person perceives where they are in society as well. That's something that, we can go on a later discussion, but yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to chime in. It's hard being a bystander. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I see Benedicta Stella is raising her hand there. Please, Bene.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible. But
Okay.
yeah.
Fine, right?
You're audible and visible as well.
Okay, thank you, Bang Herta. So, hello, Franklin and Adrian. Thank you very much for sharing your experience regarding anti-Asian hate in America, and we are in solidarity with you guys because I think all people here have to support our fellow Asian Americans because we think that all lives matter. So responding your experiences, I have 2 point of questions. The first one is I just read the news this morning regarding how the U.S. Senate progresses the anti-Asian American hate law, right? And then currently I said that I saw that U.S. Senate actually already passed this bill to fight anti-Asian hate crime. So the first question is responding the the good the good response coming to the government. I think that when we talk about racism, it's a system. So we need a collective matter, right, to break the chain, the racism chain itself. So um, for us here in Indonesia, if we want to support, if we want to be aware more regarding this issue, what kind of simple actions or simple support that you think it is very valuable for you guys in order to support you, in order to be in solidarity with you? And the second question is, how do you guys respond towards the term of Asian American dreams? We all know that many Asian people immigrate to the US because they want to get better life, whether it is in social life, in economy life, in political life, or even the concept of freedom itself. So responding to the current situation right now and about Asian American dream, how it connects according to your experience as Asian American. So thank you.
No, that sounds political. Okay, Adrian, you wanna answer to that?
I think the concept of I don't think it's just an Asian American dream. I think it's just an American dream. Um, I think the notion of the American dream is kind of like sold in this kind of idea: if you want a better life, come to this country. If you work hard for it, you will get the life that you get. And that's a concept that I think I profited from it. My parents thought they could move here to this country where they seen their family succeed and thought that they could build a better future. My dad had lost his job in Vietnam. We had moved here. My parents had worked working class jobs. They raised two college educated children. They have a house. They have like my parents' dreams were achieved. But I think for me as an Asian American, that is a very interesting dream because it wasn't my dream, right? Like I didn't know what to come. I just have to accept it. So when you come from this country where they tell you if you do your hard work, you do everything you're supposed to do, and you'll earn the respect and the kind of things that you receive, and you go into society and you're just like, wait, this isn't what American like being. I don't think being racist is American. I think being American is being open to others and welcome them even if they look different from you, because that's the beauty of the United States. That's why I think that's what I think being American is. It's the opportunity to meet people who have different backgrounds and different languages and different cultures, and to learn about them and who they are. And I think that's a very beautiful thing that is a lot of Asian people still believe to this day. I might have missed another part of your question, but I hope I could address a little bit of that.
Yeah. I think Bene asked about what's the smallest thing, right, Bene? In what
Yeah.
form you think could be a support in tackling or dealing with this hate, anti-Asian American crime? Because right now, when talking about on a bigger scale, the government through Senate is now passing the bill to hate against this Asian American hate crime. But what do you think, like the simplest and the smallest thing to help fellow Asian American in handling this situation now? Maybe from people from different raised like from maybe from white people themselves or from our brothers and sister black people and other races? Okay, Frank, you want to answer on that?
Sure. I think those are two very good questions, right? In terms of, how can people support and sort of make change and show solidarity, and also from an Asian American experience, what does Asian American dreams really mean, right? And so, to start to build off what Adrian sort of said and focusing on the Asian American dreams first again, is that I think it is tough for a lot of people, right? And if you think about what's been happening during COVID and some of the stories, people have lost their livelihoods. Like, their businesses have been burned. They thought they were achieving the American dream, and then it's just disappeared the next day. And so it can be very tough for a number of different individuals. But again, I think for a lot of Americans and Asians in America, I think there's this hope that when you read the Declaration of Independence, to Adrian's point, that's what we all believe in, right? We believe in this dream that we're all created equal, that we have this freedom to be happy, and that we have this equal voice. And I think depending on the reason why a lot of people leave and come to America, it's because of that dream, right? Because of what the Statue of Liberty represents. And so I think in the hearts of a lot of people, and why so many people are so outspoken about what's happening today, is because we believe it can change, it can become better, that America is better. And so there's still that dream that still exists. Like I don't think it will ever disappear. And if you look at the history of America, whether you're thinking about Asian Americans or Irish Americans or Blacks, you've seen steps towards this dream that people will always have. That being said, in the future, that dream might be possible in other places, like in Europe, in other countries, in Asia, potentially. And so, America might not be the only place to go to, but that's sort of the American dream that a lot of people hope for. And so I don't think it's dead yet. I think people are super excited about it. And I do think one thing that Asians in America can do is to vote, right? And to vote for the president that they think will have the change, vote for the senators and the representatives that they think will have a change, but also more importantly, vote for the local leaders like the mayors, the council people, the DA, that will have change that can make that dream much more possible. And so when we go back to your first question of like, what can people do from a solidarity perspective, whether they're in the US or outside the US, first is awareness, right? I think to use your platform to share the news about what's going on and create awareness of what's happening. I think, America, for better or worse, does not like to look bad, right? And so when there's a lot of news out there about what's happening in the US, it creates more awareness about it. People will care more about it. Politicians will care more about it. And our news outlets will care more about the news, the more it's shared. I think the other piece is, sometimes journalism outside the US is better than journalism within the US. When we look at specifically Asian violence that's been happening here, there's been a number of incidents where the Korean newspaper or Korean journalism does a better job of reporting what's happening in America. So when we think about what happened in Atlanta, where those 6 Asian American women were killed, the Korean Korean newspapers were doing a better job at getting the information quickly. They knew exactly who the people that were impacted, and they also knew better to not share the names of the victims, because culturally in Korea, one way to respect people who are dead is to keep their names not public, right? And sometimes even use different names when they share the names of the people who have died. But they were ahead of the US news team about what was happening, and they were first to say that it was racially motivated and a hate crime before the US did. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Thai newspapers or the Thai social media have done a really good job of highlighting a case in New York where a Thai chef had her cat killed, and she was also assaulted, and so was her boyfriend, in a park in New York. And again, Thai social media people brought that to light much faster than people in the US did. right? And so there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for people to use their voice. And then, like, same for me. Like, I do not have a lot of followers, and when I made that social media post, it was really for my friends, and it just happened to go viral. So you'll never know the impact that one voice, that one person can have to create a movement. The other way is to support through money. Obviously, there's a number of community organizations that do a lot of great work on the ground to build these safe neighborhoods, right? And so how you create community is by having community organizations really do the work. Through education, through helping people who are in poverty, providing food for the people who are poor, and that creates less stress and less frustrations within the community, and that decreases the chance of violence impacting Asian Americans, as well as Asian Americans being put in a spot where they could be vulnerable.
No,
Um,
awesome. Yeah, Adrian.
no, no, I think what Franklin says, right? Like everyone has a platform. I don't have a lot of followers either. I don't use social media, but I do know that my friends look at my posts, and I think that in order to change what you see in society, you want to also be the person who kind of changes your social circle, because your social circle is who you are as a person. And so the more people that you make aware of it, the more that they understand where you're coming from as well. I do think I want to address someone that's in the chat. I think it was Nauli from the Faculty of Vocation. I think she was asking about how racism is brewing through social media. Racism often takes place through social media. And so how do you use your social media wisely and well? And how do you prevent racism from occurring through social media? So I think that's a very good question, right? How I think when Herto told me about how he learned about the kind of like Asian hate crimes going on in the United States, he told me it wasn't through CNN, it wasn't through BBC, it wasn't through any of these international news organizations, but it was through TikTok. And right now we have become a generation. Our generation has become so globalized that we share more in common with people across around the world with us, because we do speak other languages. We review platforms that are worldwide. And so, I don't think you can ever prevent racism from happening in social media, right? Like this is just going to be something it's a public forum. There are going to be a lot of people. They're going to say hateful things. You can never prevent it. But how do you use your social media wisely? Well, I think social media is a very good platform for you to understand what's going on around the world. But I think you should also understand that there's a lot of fake news. There's a lot of fake information that's going on out there. And so to kind of do your own research, right? Don't believe every post that you see. If you see something that you're interested in, read multiple articles, read multiple documentation on it, and read it from people around the world. Like I think Franklin had mentioned that there was a tie in the Korean media, right? There's no way that we're going to learn, if we're lucky enough, they have an English edition, but right, sometimes it's hard to gauge where your source is. But I would just encourage everyone to research and, speak with how you feel, but also understand, the information that you're going to take it from. That's how you use social media wisely. And your generation, you guys are, I think, 7 years. I'm 27. So you're of that generation where social media is part of your life. You use it all the time. And I think just, take everything that you read with a grain of salt. And that saying is very American, that it's very English. But taking everything with a grain of salt just means don't take it at 100%, do your own research of it.
Yeah. I mean, like you have to have your own filter yourself just to really know what it is, because sometimes people can use social media also to drive you to certain goals, like and it could be misleading. And
Yeah. No, I think like one thing is kind of like to make it relevant to to make it relevant to the kids here, right? When you do your research papers, when you write them in your classes, do you take the first source that you read from everything and just cite that? No, you use multiple different sources because you're researchers, you're students. Do the same thing that you do, when you consume anything.
Yep, totally good. And then thank you, by the way, Adrian, for making it easy on me because I was gonna read that question, but then now you're answering it. So good. And then I think if there's no one ask any questions or giving comment on that, I think I'm gonna ask my own questions to Adrian and Franklin. Do you guys agree? Because I heard from one of my friends in the States, he said that. These all the situation that's been happening to Black Lives Matter and also now Asian American. It happened because the politicians or those who have or control the system want to divide Americans. Do you guys agree with that? Because like I heard that well actually Asian Americans are fine, Black people are fine. It's just these people create a certain situation or create the vibe that there is something going on. So I think I found it a little bit contradictory with the story that you guys shared with us today. Now I realize that it's been happening for for so long. It's just I think like what Franklin or Adrian said. It's just about a momentum, right? And then it kind of it reached the peak of being silent for so long. So yeah, I just want to know your comment on that kind of what is it take on that racism, Adrian or Franklin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the camp that it does exist, right? And I don't necessarily think it's solely the politicians. I think it's years and years and years of racism, and the reason why it also exists and why it's important to talk about is it's actually a combination of racism and capitalism, right? And so it's not just something that's impacting, let's say, people of color, but capitalism has a history of exploiting people and communities, right? And in America, the easiest way to do that was to focus on marginalized communities. For a time, it was Irish Americans, it was Italian Americans at some point, it was Jewish Americans, Asian Americans, and Blacks were brought here in chains. And so, and the reason why all that happened was because of capitalism, right? And exploiting them to some degree. And so as differences disappear, I think then maybe potentially some of that exploitation will not happen. But the reason why racism is still rampant and why politicians are involved in it is because of money, right? It goes hand in hand in the sense that we need to somehow make money, and the way you do that is potentially by gaming the system. And sometimes when you game the system, it hurts the people who don't have enough money. And the people who don't have money systemically are the people who are usually people of color or marginalized communities, right? And so that's why it impacts Blacks and Asian Americans, and why politicians are involved in that, because it comes down to capitalism, right? And so there is some systemic pieces, but it's really hard to capture. I think for even within the Asian American community, a lot of people might not think it exists, especially towards Asian Americans, because they think they do it well. Because I'm gonna make this at very, very high level, but there's explicit racism, which is very individualized, like people like I'm attacking you, and there's unconscious or implicit racism, which is systemic, which is more hidden. It's sort of out there, and it's much bigger and harder to fight. And I do think that exists, but it's just built on this foundation that's really difficult to tackle.
Totally agree with you. It's not a made up situation. It exists. Yeah.
Yeah,
And Adrian.
oh yeah. No, I think it completely exists. I think there has been a buildup of it, and I think partially of that is to go back to my last response, which is social media. This is a connected world. Everyone has a cell phone. Everyone has a camera, and everyone has a story to share. And so it's not that it's just happening all of a sudden now. It's been happening for the longest time. I think in response to being Asian American and the increase in racism, you can definitely say it was an impact from the coronavirus originating from Wuhan, China, and the previous president that we had, and the rhetoric that was shared, and the media that blew it up. So in a kind of sense, people there is a news responsibilism, a responsibility to what the news and the media has to say. It's to say that racism hasn't existed in the United States is to deny the history of the United States. This is a country that is built on people coming over it and using the resources and using the people that have been here, which is the history of a lot of around the world. I think to relate to the Indonesians here, right? Like Indonesia for the longest time was controlled by the Dutch. Somehow, they took over that, and that's kind of how Indonesia was formed. And do your history, and that's how that's how people came here. They exploit the resources, they exploit the people, and that's how the history of the United States has always been. I think people are just being more aware of it. People are sharing more about it. People are getting more fired up about it. Yeah. This is just something that it's the response of the times.
Well, thank you. Guys, teman-teman, itu tadi yang ada banyak hal ya sebenarnya yang sudah disampaikan oleh Adrian dan Franklin. Kira-kira teman-teman, semoga sih harapannya menangkap ya semua yang sudah disampaikan. Karena kalau harus berhenti sebentar untuk menerjemahkan, untuk translate satu-satu itu tidak akan cukup waktunya. Sementara menurut saya ini adalah topik yang menarik. Tadi ada beberapa poin yang tadi Adrian dan Franklin juga sudah sebutkan terkait dengan hal-hal yang mungkin yang tadi ditanyakan oleh Bene ya, apa yang bisa dilakukan. Franklin menjawab dengan baik tentang awareness. Yang penting itu kita tahu dulu ada isu seperti ini, terus kita speak up, berani berbicara. Terus tadi yang dibilang terkait dengan social media, juga Adrian menambahkan social media, we need to be careful and apa istilahnya, you need to filter dulu apa yang kamu baca dari atau dapatkan dari social media, do your own research kayak gitu. Terus tadi terkait juga dengan pertanyaan apakah ini adalah sistem yang dibuat-buat gitu, isu yang dibuat-buat oleh politisi untuk memecah belah. Nah, ini juga bukan seperti itu ya, karena ini sudah terjadi begitu lama. Tadi sudah dengarkan ceritanya si Franklin bagaimana dari kecil ada Franklin lahir di Amerika, jadi dia selalu merasa diri orang Amerika. Sementara untuk si Adrian, dia lahir di Vietnam, dia harus merasa dia dibentuk Amerikanya, he need to form that feeling gitu untuk merasa as an American kayak gitu. Itu yang pertama tadi. Jadi kalau masih punya pertanyaan, saya kasih kesempatan sebelum kita tutup sesi question and answer ini, teman-teman. Silakan mau tanya apa saja. Feel free to ask anything that you want to ask. I know that please do it live ya. I don't think a chat room will be good for you because because you're practicing your English as well here. So make sure that you get on, open your camera and then speak. Don't worry about your pronunciation. Don't worry about your structure and grammar. I'm sure that Franklin and Adrian can understand as well. I mean, like even myself, I don't speak good English. I think our dean has something to say. Ma'am Susan, you have something to say?
This is a quick question and maybe a simple one, but I really don't know the answer to this. And it just pop out the question. So why, I don't know when it started, but then why do we have this division, African American, Asian American, Caucasian? I don't know. Can you two enlighten me when it started? Because I think I've been around in this world for a long time, but then I just realized Franklin is. I am longer. Can you explain?
I can help explain with that. So there's a professor. So what happened is that, so I can tell you the history of the term Asian American, right? The history of the term Asian American was defined by a professor in UCLA in around the 1968 kind of movement. So what happened in the United States is that during the 1960s and during the 1970s, there were two revolutions. There were two cultural revolutions that were happening at that time. There was the civil rights movement and there was the cultural liberation movement. And during that kind of era, it was the time of Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and these prominent Black American voices that were going on. And they were defining what it means to be Black American, what it means to be African American. And at that same time, the Asian American movement was happening. And that same time, you have Ichioka, like I mentioned. There's another movement that's going on at that same time in California with the Cesar Chavez and the farmers' rights movements. There was something that was going on with the Filipinos movement kind of then. And so the term Asian American was defined by this professor, and it was to envelop what it was that our values that we had brought from the country, are from where our parents had come from, because they were at that time the second generation, right? He was Japanese American. By that time, Asian Americans have been here to this long to have felt like they were American. And so to define, I think that kind of term hyphen, like African American, Black American, it is something that's kind of like defining your identity, because the United States itself is a country that's formed by the other people that have populated it. And so that's how you kind of really identify yourself. I hope that kind of answers your question, because
Okay.
I think in the United States, the concept of racial identity is something that's, very Western. And I think in Indonesia, where in countries like Indonesia, where the population itself is also very diverse. You have, Javanese, Balinese, like very diverse populations, different kind of things. It's also different as well, because you have to really, I would myself would have to learn about the history of Indonesia to understand where all that kind of names come from. And in terms of America, it just kind of means that it's kind of like we talk about where our ancestors, where our family came from and what we eat and what we have as our food. Does that kind of help? Franklin, maybe you can, add on to my point or tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely right. I mean, and your question is getting at, why do these different communities not like each other, right? And why don't we necessarily get along? And it's complex, I would say, and it's hard to describe. But to build off what Adrian was saying, is that in the 60s, I think the Blacks in America have struggled and been exploited for a number of years. And during the civil rights movement, they were fighting for their rights. And what mainstream media did was coin this term of model minority to tell Blacks that, look, it is not racism. There is not an issue in the US. We are not pushing you down. We're not exploiting you, because look at these other minorities. Look at Asians. They are doing well, right? And so that sort of started this snowball that pitted two communities against each other to say that made some Blacks believe that Asians were sort of holding them back, right? Because Asians were able to do well, we don't need to provide funding for Blacks, right? They just need to work harder. They just need to apply themselves and focus on education. And so it created this divide between these different communities. At the same time, mainstream media also tends to paint Blacks in a dangerous way. And so I think for immigrants who are coming to America, it's really easy to focus on those news, to think about, Blacks are potentially more dangerous. There's more crime in Black areas, and so they tend to avoid some of what's happening. I think this came to a huge pinnacle during the LA riots in 1992, where this Korean American woman.
It was a woman, yeah.
Yeah, shot a 12 or 14-year-old Black girl in the back because they suspected them of stealing from the store, and she died. And so what happened was this lady got acquitted, spent no jail time, and a lot of Black Americans are really mad. And again, it sort of emphasized that Asians are like white people and can get away with crime. And then the Rodney King happened and the LA riots happened. And so during the LA riots, a lot of Blacks remembered this event that happened and burned down a lot of Korean American businesses, again, creating tension within the community. And again, media portrayed it as a fight and didn't show the solidarity, because a couple of days later, a lot of Blacks helped Korean Americans rebuild their community, clean up their places, but you didn't see that in the news, right? And so again, this idea, and to the earlier question of politicians playing a role in this, like media, politicians, you just focus on the drama, and that continues to create that divide that pits these communities together, and other people who aren't impacted sort of aren't impacted and aren't affected, right? And so there's a lot of history that builds upon it, and there's more I can go into, but those are probably the two major events that sort of created this divide between Asian Americans and Blacks.
Yeah, and
Well,
I think to add on to Franklin's point, right? They like to show the divide, but they don't teach us the solidarity. There has been a lot of coalitions between Black and Asian Americans. People get along in this country more than they don't get along. Like normal, decent Americans get along, and we life is normal and standby. But there is a kind of, these stories sell. They sell a lot of people. They sell a lot of views. And so what people don't see is that it's that the story of telling of how the coming together of Black and Asian Americans in the 1960s helped define what Asian American was. They don't talk about the people helping building. People aren't aware. So I think in part of that is because the news doesn't cover it. So in terms of using your social media, you be the news that share it happen, show these solidarity that kind of happen. Try to people are working together to help build a better country and build a better society as well. That this divide that they try to portray this country is, it's not like, it does happen, but there's more solidarity people, and people are more understanding what they think of.
I
think
don't know how many people. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people like psychology, but like this is called availability bias. So if you want to look up availability bias, basically you start to believe what you see more of. And this is not just a racism thing. Like it also it just refers to anything in the news. And so people are more afraid of car accidents than smoking, for example, because that's what news focuses on. News focuses on these crazy accidents, but more people die from smoking than from car accidents, right? So availability bias definitely warps the way we think and informs our beliefs. And so it's really important to expand your news sources and where you get your news, as well as the social media people that you follow. So to Adrian's point, you get the news, but you also get the stories of solidarity, the stories of happiness, the stories of community, because that availability bias is what informs what you believe.
I think I like what Adrian said here. People get along in this country a lot more than they don't get along. Yeah, I mean, like the other days when I saw that this part of Black, like he's Black American, which I believe part of the Black American community, who did, I think he was the one who kicked the lady in front of the hotel. I think, it was a little bit disappointed for me, like deep down in my heart, because, you should be in solidarity, because, these two races are victims of the racism in the States. But still, I think, if I can relate to what Franklin said, sometimes, even though we come from this victimized, what is it? Victimized races, still we need to be educated. We need to be aware that something is wrong there. And lastly, I think Mr. Moyar said he agreed also with what Adrian said. People get along in this country. As a fellow American, Mr. Moyar, I want to hear what's your take on all the sharing that you know uh, done by Franklin and Adrian before we move on, before we close the session. I want to hear from you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate these guys coming on, and it's been very interesting for me to hear the perspective, and I think a lot of what they've said, even their life stories, I think about hearing where they come from, And I really have liked, I thought the questions that people have come up with have been quite thoughtful. And this is very, these topics are very critical and very important, I think, for us in this country. I did like that last that you quoted Adrian on, because I think you can get a pretty, the impression that you get is that everybody is in on this and so forth. And I think the number, I mean, there's always going to be people that are racist, and there are people that are racist everywhere. But there's also, I think, a lot more that are not, and that realize how bad it is, and things like that. So, and the United States is, historically has been a melting pot. And when the melting pot works, everybody gets along with everybody else. And we're a country based on a covenant. Someone mentioned again the founding fathers and the principles and things, and there are some very good principles. It's not a country that has a long history of, a particular part of the world where they've lived forever, or a particular group of people who have lived in the same place. I mean, this is truly a place where people, it's relatively new, but people have come from everywhere, all over the world, and have, managed to make things work pretty well. But there's always issues. There's always things that we can improve. And there's a lot of, things that I think can really be helped. But, to me, a lot of the solution kind of gets to people's hearts, and it gets back to, why are people behaving in such terrible ways? And it's really hard to figure out, and it's bad, but I think we just have to be careful not to use too broad a brush and think, okay, and the whole notion of even grouping people in categories is dangerous. The US has got, there's a lot of people that are in between just intermarriages and things like that. There's people that are all sorts of different ethnicities mixed into one person. And these people are not in a particular group, but they're kind of spanning a lot of groups. So anyway, I've really enjoyed hearing from both Franklin and Adrian, and also the questions that you guys brought. So thank you. And some of these topics I think you could talk about for days. And
Yeah.
I guess one question, if I had a question, it would be, if there's the biggest change that either of them would like to see, if something were to happen in the next several months, what would that be?
That was gonna be my question. Thank you very much for
Uh-oh.
making it easy. I think, thank you, Mr. Moyer. I think that can wrap up this question and answer session. That's the last question to Adrian and Franklin.
Okay.
I'll go. I'll go. I'll go. I think for me, something happening in the next couple of months in terms of relations between people of different color is that, it's been a hard time in I think for me, I don't know, this year has been hard, right? This year has been hard. It's been hard on me as a person working from home. It's been hard for me as a person watching this through the news. It's been hard on me as an Asian American. And I think something for happening with me in the next couple of months is just more conversations like this, right? Like this is something that I've been watching through history. And, in the 1960s, they would have these kind of discussions about race. And it'd be people from all these kind of different sides, but they all kind of listen to one another and they hear what they have to say, even if, we might share different opinions or different backgrounds, but it's something that more like this happening. And without these kind of screaming matches or personal attacks, let the person get the time to talk and just be more patient and listening to one another. That's something that I think I would hope to see, in terms of the news, in terms of politics, in terms of media. It just takes time, just for this country to heal a little bit. There's been, the past 4 years have been hard as kind of like an American, and you kind of see these kind of things happening in the news, and you want to see your country go towards a better place. I think right now I can't really answer the question, but that's how I would answer it.
Yeah, thank you. And what about you, Franklin?
Yeah, I mean, there's a long, long wish list, but if we're talking about like near-term tangible change, I think, you know, what Adrian said is right, where like I definitely look towards the future, right? And you know, when you think about the future, it comes down to kids and it comes down to education. And what I would love to see change from a tangible perspective is to see more stories and you know, more education around our history in the U.S. You know, when you talk about Native Americans and what happened to them, when you talk about the Black history and Asian American history, and do it from the lens of the voices that were impacted and the stories that they have to tell, I think that spurs that conversation that Adrian is talking about, right? And so we know that racism, people are not born racist, right? They are not born to have hatred. And so it's something that's learned. And I think it's also something that can be unlearned. And so when you talk about these stories of how racism exists and why it's important and why we shouldn't do these things, and also the stories of success and community and triumph, like those have been left out predominantly when I think about my own education when I was younger in school. And so I think the more that we can incorporate a cultural competence into our educational system as early as possible is super important. I would love to see that change in the near term.
Amen to that. We hope that all of us can see the changes that mentioned. And thank you very much. That wraps up our question and answer session. And I'm so thankful for you guys, sharing all the information with us, answering all the questions. And thank you also for those who asked questions. Great, beautiful questions, high qualified. And it's time for us to. We're going to give away voucher here. We've got 4 vouchers for OVO. It's digital money in Indonesia. So please, students, feel free to join in, because I was waiting for you guys to ask questions. It happened to be only 2 of you guys ask questions in person. Most of you ask the questions on chat room. So please now use this time. Miss Nina is there to help us to control who's raising hand, yeah, and Edus also. This and also Sena. Okay, I'm going to ask the questions. Do you know where in the US does Franklin live? Please raise your hand if you know. Okay, Peter Nee. Are you a student from Christian University?
The mute.
I'm not. I'm Franklin's friend, so I want to.
Oh,
No,
well, welcome,
no.
Peter. Wow, how come I had no idea that you were here? I should have asked you questions though.
Yes.
I'm probably going to talk to Franklin afterwards about it. So,
welcome, Peter.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you also. Maybe next time Franklin or Adrian can bring more friends, and Peter, you can join us and having the conversation with us. Well, yeah, since Peter is not students, so I cannot give I cannot give the voucher to Peter, because the digital money won't be available also in the States. I saw
Yesi.
but can we have other than Yesi, because we're giving something to Yesi
The other day.
even though the other day, even though she's not answering the question.
Oh, that's good. That maybe I should join more often.
You have to join more often. I'm thinking about working with you, so just hit me up after this, okay? Hit me, baby, one more time. No, I'm kidding. That's not funny. Okay. All right then. It's awkward, but please, anyone other than Yesi?
We got Iman and Nauli.
Peter, you can leak the answer of Nauli. Yeah, please answer the question.
Mute.
You're still muted. Can I see your face?
Atlanta.
Okay. What? Okay. Franklin, what do you think? Do you live in Atlanta? Is Franklin still here?
I do not live in Atlanta. Someone else lives in Atlanta.
Yeah. So it's wrong answer. Okay. Anyone else? I will change the question now. Okay. Where? It's still about Franklin. Where does Franklin? Where's? Wait, not that's not how the question. Oh no, we changed the subject now. It's Adrian. What Asian descendant is Adrian?
Vietnam.
You cannot spell the question answer like that, ma'am. Okay, you ruined it. You have to give more money to us. Well, okay, I like
Everyone
that.
is so quiet.
Yeah, okay.
It wakes up the devil in me.
Oh, are you okay? There's devil
I
inside of
am.
you. Okay. Well, okay. Okay. I'm gonna put someone on spotlight. Priscilla Ruth L. Are you there? Priscilla. Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay. I wanna know now where where who was born in Vietnam?
Adrian.
Can you tell me his full name? Priscilla?
Wait.
Sorry? Priscilla, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, what's his full name? One, two.
Adrian Nguyen.
Okay, is that correct? Okay, okay, Putri Priscilla. You get our digital voucher. Okay, I'm going to Marcelino. No, I'm going to Nauli. Nauli Natalia. Nauli, are you still there?
Yes.
Now I want to ask you a question, but this is going to be hard question. No? What is the theme of today's program? It's going to
Sorry?
be. What's the theme of today's program?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can you repeat again?
What is the theme of today's program? The Native Speaker Day for today. What is the theme? One, two,
USA?
three.
I don't know.
You don't know? Oh. Okay. Well, it's okay, no problem. Okay. Anyone else who wants to answer the question? What is the theme for today's program? Raise your hand.
We got Iman.
Yeah, Iman, please.
The theme is Stop Asian Hate.
Stop Asian Hate. Okay, yes. Another voucher for you. Don't forget to talk to us. Okay, I think this is the last question. Yeah, I'm going to ask anyone who is Franklin's friend who suddenly joined us today. Anyone know? Anyone know?
I know.
Me.
No, no,
Sinta,
please, not
Sinta.
you.
We got Sinta.
You got Sinta, yeah, Sinta.
Peter.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. the voucher, the digital money will be from Peter in this stage. Okay, I will
I
ask
know.
him to. No, I'm kidding.
Pick me. I know.
I'll
No,
give
I'm
it. It's
kidding.
okay.
Oh, okay, Peter, are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, no, we will hand out the digital money.
You
Okay,
still
and
have money for me?
unless you know where Peter comes from, I mean, like, what Asian descendant is he?
Hmm.
Now you have to find out, ma'am.
Okay, Peter, call me.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like, again, I totally understand why students are still kind of shy. They don't really want to speak out because like they are the first
Hong
batch
Kong,
of
Hong Kong, Hong Kong. Masih? Boleh kan?
are you from Hong Kong, Peter? I mean, like, are you a Hong Kong Asian American? Is that correct?
China.
I'm from
Oh,
Taiwan.
I just
Taiwanese.
call out all
Okay,
places
thank
Asia.
We're
you.
close.
You're from Taiwan, so ma'am, sorry you don't get the money. Thank you
Okay,
so much,
I'll
Peter.
find my own money. It's payday today.
Yeah.
No worry.
Yes. Don't worry. Yeah. Thank God it's Friday here in Indonesia. I
And
hope no
payday.
one getting drunk tonight because it's still COVID-19. Okay. No, I'm kidding. Well, yeah. Thank you so much, guys. As I totally understand why students are still, like, very shy to speak up or to ask questions because this is the first native speaker day with different audience, and just to share with you guys that this native speaker day will be monthly program. Initially we plan to do it in January, but due to this COVID-19 and there were so many things that we had to take care of, we couldn't do it. But thank God that like last month we got connected with Adrian. So now it is possible for us to do it. I see Ma'am Susan wants to say something.
Franklin and Adrian, do you read? Can we talk about books? Because we are from faculty of letters. We talk about novels. If you are interested, maybe Herto can come up with an event so that the
Yeah.
students they are not reluctant to talk about things.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you, ma'am. I think I got Franklin's contact with me and then Adrian, and we are actually in the same WhatsApp group. I hope that can that can last longer in terms of speaking
More
about something that,
activities.
yeah, more activity, more beneficial activity in terms of developing people or empowering fellow Asians here in. And then I'm sure that we have also, like, hopefully Peter can join also, and then also we've got Mr. Moyer.
And
Yep, and then we have also other friends who can participate in so many activities. Let's call it kind of like I don't know how you call it, like like a charity kind of thing. But we see that many things that we can do from there. But for now, thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. Again, I know this is very late, 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 super late at night there. But I think we are all young, young in spirit. So it's not a big deal for us, right? So thank you very much for joining us again, and stay safe for Franklin and Adrian and Mr. Moya, Peter, and also from our friends who come from outside of Christian University of Indonesia. Uh, but please don't leave the room yet because we will have a photo session, right, Nina? Miss Nina? Yeah. Okay. Uh, is it on my count or are you doing it on me? Okay. Okay, guys. Before I hand it over back to Miss Nina, strike a good pose because we're about to capture screen just to have our picture together. Hopefully next year it will be on calendar of 2022 for the active. No, ma'am, you cannot use that filter, pic filter. No.
I cannot. I'm so
Yes.
sad. Oh, sorry.
All right then. Everyone, please open your camera and then please put off your mask because I know you're alone there. Yes, I'm speaking about Eduardus because I know you're still wearing mask. Now I need to see your face. Iman, you cannot use your profile picture. It's not you. Actually, it's your profile picture. So please turn on your camera. Aprilia, thank you. Esther, thank you. Ibu Erita, thank you. Uki, Yesi also thank you. Michela, yeah. Monica, Tommy, Unita. Oh,
Suryani.
sorry, Sarah, beautiful hair, by the way. I like your color of hair, Sarah. And Priscelia, please show your face, not just your eyes. Analta Zelda. Okay. Good morning, Sinta and Yesa and Ivana. Smile, please. Moses and also Clinton, Julia, Sarah, and Adiranto. Thank you very much for smiling, Kelly, Pinel, Lois, and okay, everyone is ready. But Marcelino, I see. Can you turn on your camera? Oh, good hoodie. All right then. Everyone ready? I'm gonna count. Wait a minute. Okay. In one, two, three. Okay. Next layer. One, two, three. Okay. Next layer. One, two, three. More, Edus? Masih? Edus? Okay.
Can we
Okay.
have the
We're,
filter?
okay. Different style. Different style. Okay. You can use Love from
Filter.
Korea. Or if you want to use filter, please feel free to do that. This time is a fun picture. Okay. One. Okay. One, two, three. Again. One, two, three. And the last one. One, two, three. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. And yeah. Again, thank you so much, Franklin. Thank you so much, Adrian, and everyone who's joining us today. It's an honor for us to have you guys and keep spreading the good message. And I hope that whatever it is that you guys are doing will bring a better solution to what's happening now. I mean, like bring better situation and better life
And heal the
and then
world.
and heal the world because
World
we are
peace.
brothers. World peace. We are brother and sister. Now back to you, Miss Nina.
Okay, thank you for our speakers to join us today, and also Mr. Moyer, thank you to join us, and also the friends of Franklin, Peter Ning, okay, and also to Bro Herto, okay, for the moderator. Okay, hope can see you guys again in other activity. And because we open this activity with prayer, so we will closing it with prayer too. And let me to lead on the prayer. Okay, let's pray together. Heavenly Father, as we come to the end of our time together, we thank you for what has been accomplished here today. May the matters discussed serve as a catalyst to move us forward and cause us to advance and see growth in all areas of our life. Thank you for the wonderful time that we share. May all glory and honor come back to you in everything that we do. It is in the Jesus' name we'll believe and pray. Amen. Okay, thank you for everyone. And don't forget to fill the attendance form in the chat room. Okay.
Miss Nina, we also want to thank you for our leaders from Kapala Program Studi, head of study program who joined us today.
Yeah, thanks for all the head of the program study. Also our beloved Dean, Ma'am Susan. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you guys. See you in other activities. And don't forget to have lunch because it's already time for lunch. Okay, see you next time. Bye bye.
Don't forget to sleep, Franklin.
Don't forget to
Oh
sleep.
yeah, don't forget. Have a
And
nice
Mr.
dream, by
Moyer.
the way.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
It's a nice discussion.
Thank you.
I love the people.